All right, welcome back to True Poker Dealer live stream. My name is Mark, and I'll be your host for the day. On this live stream, we'll be discussing Mike's secret technique for becoming a better poker player by dealing poker, something that I've sort of learned firsthand from him. I do want to say I have been in the industry for like 13 years, and I've never really been able to take advantage of this until I learned it from Mike. So it's not something that's that simple, but at the same time, when you see it, if that makes sense. So if you have any questions, suggestions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them toward the end of the video. Mike, you seem like you had something you wanted to say. I want to hear what you got real quick.
No, there's a lot to it, and I believe that once you have the right idea, the right foundation for what to look for, then it becomes much easier to start understanding the differences of certain things. So, I think that dealing is such a great way to supplement poker playing, especially if you want to be in it long term.
Well, there's that too, and we're certainly going to dive into that. Now, if you are new to True Poker Dealer, my name is Marc Shumsker, and I am the founder of True Poker Dealer, something that I created to help people learn how to deal poker the right way, just like they do in casinos. I've been on YouTube teaching people to be poker dealers since 2012, so I've got a good amount of experience with this, and I've been teaching people all over the world, which has really been interesting and eye-opening to see how many different ways there are to do it.
This is a really unique place for me to make this comment just because you brought that up. But one trend I've noticed quite a bit in casinos over the last few years is that there's a lot of prominent, like, young male Indians that really are interested in poker. And it's an interesting country for like engineers. The population is humongous, and it's like one of the largest English speaking countries in the world. And like, there has to be poker there at some point, right? And I don't actually know if there is or isn't right now, but I look at that area as also like the next Silicon Valley potentially, and there's like all these like overlaps of like, if you're not willing to think internationally, then what are you doing on YouTube, right? Like, it's such an awesome platform that like you can reach people that you could never imagine reaching any other way.
Oh, it's blown my mind. At one point, it was about 50% of my traffic was in the U.S. and the rest was outside the U.S. And I never would have thought it would be that much. I have a little bit of experience in India, but not that much. But yeah, it's been pretty remarkable. And just to finish what I was saying, like for me, I was in the industry in the U.S. for about 10 years as a dealer, as a supervisor, as a shift manager, and I also worked in table games as a dealer and as a pit boss. And, when I first learned it, I thought there's one way to do stuff, right? That was literally what I thought. There's one way to do stuff. This is the way that I'm being taught here. And through True Poker Dealer, I have learned that there are so many different ways. And it's been really fascinating getting all that experience. And, because of that, I've actually turned it into a course, right? Right here on YouTube, you can learn how to deal poker start to finish now because of my experiences with True Poker Dealer over all this time. And it's cool that like someone can join my channel and actually get a full course on how to deal poker now. So somebody in India for the first time has much easier access to be able to do that. It's never really been like that. And
have you heard of the term? Have you heard of the term Gutenberg Revolution? I think I'm saying it properly.
So I don't know.
I heard this, and it applies to what we're talking about, but I didn't understand the definition fully. So I'm grasping here, but if somebody's listening understands that like YouTube is doing something to production that like the printing press was the last thing that had a exponential growth the way that YouTube is allowing like the individual to broadcast. And so
it's phenomenal. Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. And so just if you're watching this now and you don't know who Mike is, so I'm here with Poker Pro Michael Laake, and he's going to share his amazing method with you in a couple of minutes. It's going to allow you as a poker dealer to become a better poker player. I wish that when I was in the industry, I was able to do this. But first, Michael, can you say hi and actually tell people about your poker playing and dealing background?
Yeah. So what I like about your channel and this, invite is that my background is very much dealing and playing simultaneously. I went to college at 19 years old. I dropped out in my second semester. I immediately went to dealer school. I paid. I went to 3 different dealer schools, and I've paid probably a combined $3,000, $2,500, and that was 20 years ago, roughly. So it's pretty fascinating. Like, just your channel would have easily been enough for me to get all of the info that I need and then some. But I actually got, I spent a lot of money because it was a niche industry and there was very little info available. So at 19 years old in 2006, I got my first dealing job in Naples, Florida. Since then, back then it was $2 poker. So the ability to make money playing was very limited. Not impossible, but, beating the rake and tip in games where people are just blind capping nonstop. It was possible, but, certainly not an easy grind. Eventually Florida developed $100 poker. So I didn't take live poker very seriously because we didn't have real tournaments. We didn't have real cash games until 2007, 2009, perhaps. So I spent a lot of that time on the internet. I found 2+2 forums. I found, a lot of friends and networking. And so, we formed these little group chats, these little strategy groups. And, back then, in 2007, some of the best poker minds that you've heard of today were very open and free with their information. It's very guarded and safeguarded a bit today. But, back then, there were networks and we were all learning the game on the fly. So all the math was brand new, all the ranges and shoving, all these concepts were super new. So I would be the online kid, but my day job was dealing poker, right? So I developed this skill where I was playing mass hands and mostly focused on tournaments. Back then, PokerStars had a lot of volume in 180-man sit and goes and 45-man sit and goes. And those two were pretty much my bread and butter. I think over 6,000 games from 2007 to 2010 in the $12 180-mans, my ROI averaged out to like 58% or something. So every time I entered a $12 tournament, my expectation was to cash for $18.
All right, so I'm gonna stop you for a second. There's something really enjoyable about what you're doing here right now. So you're speaking poker in a language that a layman like myself, who has learned poker, doesn't quite get to understand. And the thing I want to say is, no, I'm not saying it in a bad way. The thing I'm going to say is, I have played over 100,000 hands of poker easily in my life between online and live. And in that time, I never had access to what I would call the right information. And you were unbelievably gifted at being able to find the right information. And it's part of why you not only have years of experience as a poker player, but you also have years of experience of using the right information to play poker. And it just makes a huge difference. And so, we recently have started a live poker coaching project where we go through hands and then you break down every decision from the hand. And this is free on YouTube, right? And it blows my mind learning how to do it from that perspective. And one second. There's something really important before we can answer the question about how to use this as a dealer in order to be able to get better at playing. There's something really important that we have to share with you about Mike's perspective when he's playing. But just real quick to finish that up. So you've been playing poker since 2006. You might not like saying this, but I'll say you've cashed for well over $1 million in live tournaments, and there's a ton of stuff online as well that doesn't get recorded. And you've been a dealer, it sounds like, for about 13 years, on and off on top of it, right? Where you've a ton of experience in the box.
More than 10, less than 15 actual dealing years. And I'm 35 years old. So, I've maybe taken 4 combined years off completely to focus full-time on poker. But, as I learn, like, I don't know that I ever want poker to be a 40-hour-a-week thing, right? It's something that I love. Absolutely, from the bottom of my heart. It's something that I know inside and out, but those extra hours possibly have a negative impact on your overall, ability to execute. So it's important to understand what kind of person you are, how much you actually love the game, and then deciding what fits your skill sets.
That makes sense. And right now in your life, are you willing to share how many hours you grind poker in one way or another on any given week or month?
If we combine every form of poker with dealing, with online cash, with online tournaments, with live cash,
separate playing and dealing.
So just playing versus dealing.
Yeah, what are you doing nowadays?
Pretty much, I would say it's probably 50-50 right now. mostly because the pandemic has really changed a lot of things and changed my approach and changed, the way I attack things. The live environment is very unique right now. So I made the adjustments as soon as the lockdowns began. We're in Florida, so it was a little looser for us than other states. But when the lockdowns began, I just knew I had to get back in the lab and get sharper because online games are significantly tougher than live games.
So are you saying like 20 hours a week each, 30 hours a week each?
I would say at least 50 to 60 hours combined.
Got it.
Probably closer to 70 combined. And so, does the dealing reach the 35 of the 70? Probably not every week. So, it's probably floats between 50% playing.
You play more when you're not dealing as much, is what you're saying.
I basically, 10 hours a day is probably about my grind, right? So, I have some amount of hours in the morning and some amount of hours in the evening, and I work my ass off, man. There's very few people that work harder than I do.
Well, that's another gift that you have, and I've seen that firsthand. So now let's not forget to mention live poker coaching here. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So one thing I kind of wanted to mention, you were talking about my ability to learn and my ability to find the right information. Well, what took me probably 10 years to realize about myself is that I love data science. And so that is one of my, little skills that I've picked up over the years that, I like understanding what happens when I get aces 1,000 times on the button and I've 3-bet them so many times and I've flatted a few times and I just do all these other sorts of things. So to go back, what was your exact question again? I'm sorry. I wanted to kind of bring that back in to kind of
I want you to tell us a little bit about live poker coaching.
Live poker coaching, exactly. So to me, the data science and me producing poker content came to a standstill for a very long time because, well, how do I make good poker content that is actually actionable and usable and people can actually get something out of it? Well, to me, I know the true value of this information is very high. So YouTube presents a unique opportunity. If I am true in the fact that I believe I'm going to make very unique poker content, then YouTube will reward me because then the masses will agree, right? So I can get the proper rewards for this effort if YouTube audience agrees with my self-proclamations. So we came up with live poker coaching from the ability to understand that poker is a game of on-the-fly thinking. So I know the charts. I understand the graphs. I understand ranges. I understand blockers. I understand all this really complex stuff that's all data science driven. But poker is a game of humans. And it's a game of information. It's a game of emotions and psychology and economics. And, there's 9 strangers at a table most of the time. Where else do you get that in any part of life, like a subway? Or like a train, maybe. Like that's it. So not only do you have that element, but you have everybody battling against each other, trying to win money or accomplish some sort of goal. Hopefully the goal is just having fun or whatever. But, in understanding how all these pieces interact, we came up with live poker coaching because I strongly believe that the way that I was starting to learn how to teach, I came up with this because it's the best way for me to actually show the on-the-fly thinking combined with using that information in an executable way. So obviously there was a lot there. I took it a few different places, but to me, live poker coaching is first the limited information. So I give as many opinions and thoughts as I can on the hand without knowing what each individual person has. And then after the hand, any of the interesting decision points we're going to reflect on, we're going to go over, and we're going to discuss the pros and cons of like how the rest of the dominoes could fall if you hit this domino a certain way.
So just to present it from the perspective of what a person's going to get if they watch a video, it starts out with, we're going to deal one hand of poker, which we've done in advance. We don't know what the hand's going to be. We deal it out. We play the hand. And we're simulating for live poker coaching. It's 2-5 no limit cash. And we did that so that we could do 500 consecutive hands, not knowing what's going to come, and show what it's like. And we really want Mike's thinking in this. And so then just like Mike said, we break down, after we play it, we break down every single decision, basically, where there's a decision point to be made. And he sort of weighs in and gives insight when it's interesting. And it's turned into this thing where I guess the thing I want to say is it's powerful to experience. And, you know, we just switched our format from, we had originally taken these hands from a live stream, and it was 3 hours long. We dealt a bunch of hands out, and then we chopped it all up with the help of some wonderful editors and turned it into one hand at a time. And we were able to upgrade that basically to a really good format, starting with about hand 34, which is going to be coming out within the next month or two. So we're super excited about this, but yeah. So let's get to this question, right? So the question that we're asking here is, in order to become a better poker player, what is the thing to do while you're dealing? Now, I have a note here that I just want to explain some of the perspective. Why we talked about live poker coaching in the first place is because you do something that I never even thought to do when I play poker. I literally learned to play poker based on what my hand is. And it was like, okay, if I have aces, I do this. If I have kings, I do this. You know, if I'm in this position, I do this. And it was like a clear, specific setup. And that's how I think a lot of people—
It was cookie cutter.
Super cookie cutter. And so something that I've noticed that you do that I want you to elaborate on is you play poker from the perspective of figuring out what your opponent's ranges are first. And then you think about your hand second and how it interacts with those ranges. And this is what you teach in live poker coaching as well. And yeah, can you talk about this and where it came from and what it is?
Here's the real factor that matters. Your hand only matters when either the dealer or the online game tells you to turn it over and to see who wins, right? So there's 4 betting rounds, one of which concludes with a showdown. The other 3 betting rounds, if everybody folds, then your cards don't matter. So very early, I was very aware that if I re-raise somebody and they think I have ace, king, kings, or aces every time, well, that's pretty powerful because I could maybe do other things with those hands so that I don't have to be always re-raising, always playing nuts. So very early, it was understanding that, you know, applying aggression is the unique way to take the advantage away from people only playing better hands.
Gotcha. So, so now you've created this mentality where basically you're saying, forget about getting to the showdown, which is basically what happens if you think about your hand first, right? You're trying to get to the showdown with that mentality, but poker's so much deeper than that. So forget about getting to the showdown. You want to create a plan, so to speak, or a system, so to speak, where you can figure out exactly when you can get somebody off of a hand, and exactly when, and by exactly when, I mean, if you get an edge where you do it over and over again, it's profitable, right? So you're trying to find those moments, which is foreign to somebody like me up until I started working on this stuff and learning this stuff. So because of that, the number one most important thing, maybe there's a few of these, but we'll say right now, the number one most important thing becomes understanding what somebody's range is, right? That's the bread and butter of poker if you are playing on a higher level than, say, me, which I'm getting there for the record. But it's all about figuring out what somebody else's range is. And so maybe that's a little hint or a teaser as to what you can do when you're at the table as a dealer, right?
Absolutely.
So why don't you dive in there?
So I believe most people understand the concept of the poker grid, right? It's a 13 by 13 kind of sheet where there's the pocket aces in one corner, and then all the aces that are offsuit are along the top. All the suited aces are on the left side. The bottom, well, you know, it'll just kind of, the pocket pairs will be the diagonal. This is every combination of hand that people can be dealt in any form of poker, Texas Hold'em specifically. So I started thinking, or I guess I learned the game through kind of like, think about it like Minesweeper, I guess would be the best way I'd put it. They only got so many flags on the, or so many or if it's a dartboard, for example, right? There's a bullseye, that's the right answer. And then everything around the bullseye is, relatively close to the right answer or in the same ballpark as the right answer. So yeah, there's a great example of it. So really, like, if you think of their hands in these terms, then this is where you start understanding how your hands interact with their hands, right? So a very easy example is, they have a missed flush draw. Okay, well, how many missed flush draws do they have? Do they have 7-4 suited or 9-3 suited? If they have those kind of flush draws, it makes a massive difference. So if those all missed, well, then maybe we should be bluffing more, right? So it's understanding how many of the pieces of this puzzle are still in play based on every action they've taken so far, and then understanding, well, how does that combination interact with my hand?
All right, so let me see if I can repeat this a little bit. So me not ever having thought of this, when I've dealt plenty of hands, right? Am I thinking about this chart in my mind? No. And the thing I'm losing, according to what you're saying, is I'm losing the proper perspective to truly evaluate what somebody else has. So what you're saying is you burned this into your brain very early on, right? You took this chart right here and you just seared it right into the front.
It's really all that matters. It's really all that matters is how many of these can we remove from the equation as quickly or as frequently as we can.
And every single time you think about, like, in the middle of a hand, you're looking at every single person or every single poker hand that's remaining in terms of this chart. And now, so we understand the chart's really valuable, right? But how do you actually evaluate what somebody else has in terms of this chart at any given moment? Like, what are you doing?
I'd be lying if I said that it was anywhere near as detailed as we're making it sound. I want to be clear. So when you see aces on here, what that means to me is that also represents every version of aces that can be dealt to somebody. So for example, the ace of spades can come in 3 ways. It can come also with the ace of clubs, the ace of diamonds, and the ace of hearts. So that equals, that's just the spade version. Now, if you add the other versions, it ends up being 6, right? There's 6 ways that you can get aces with different suits. And as you go through, well, ace king suited, you can only get that 4 ways, right? So if you want to take it to the next level, if I know somebody only has kings, aces, ace king suited, and ace king offsuit, well, then I can actually tell you with a reasonable amount of detail what percentage they have each one. There's just many versions of ace king offsuit. There's a few versions of the pocket pairs. And then how does that compare to the overall perspective? So if they have those hands exactly, then I would have a reasonable idea that, 12 of the combos are the big pairs and the rest of them are the ace highs, for example. So that would be how I would determine how I might play pocket queens in a situation, right?
So, all right. So we have the difficult task now of being able to explain how to get to the point where somebody has never really thought about poker in terms of this chart, up to the point where they're at least starting to create ranges on people. Now, I understand through talking with you that you're saying, okay, based on what somebody's decisions have been in a hand, you're able to say they're definitely not going to have these hands, and there's a possibility that they have these hands, right? And then you're also saying, well, if you have an ace in your hand, then that removes, say,
sure. If I change that,
them having aces, for example.
If I change that queen's example into ace queen, then I know that my ace is not part of their holdings. So all of the ones that had the ace that I have are no longer in play. This is a unique scenario, and that's why actually kings are a strangely common hand when it's good hand versus good hand in ace queen versus kings, because when you remove an ace and a queen from the deck, how many other really good hands are left? Well, it's actually a weirdly concentrated into kings, because you block queens, you block aces, you block, ace king, etc. So it's a really unique way that, sometimes with ace queen, you just got to put them on kings because it's kind of the most likely hand left of the good hands, for example.
And that totally makes sense in terms of the number of combinations. But how do you even know what they're likely to have? So let's talk about an example. There was a hand that we played in a live poker coaching session where You raised pre-flop with aces. You had a fish on the button that called that raise. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back even further.
Okay.
This hand was raised from early position, and then you 3-bet it with aces. You had a fish call the 3-bet, and then you had our guest, Steve, 4-bet from the small blind. Okay, so talk about how you're able to narrow his range down on the small blind at all. Like, what is it that you're thinking about?
I don't know how much we want to get into this hand specifically versus, the broad perspective, but in that hand, so very, very quickly, when somebody is a cold caller on the button, so there's a raise and a re-raise. So I think the action was maybe like 75 or so in that hand. When somebody has 0 invested and they call multiple raises, it really boxes them into a very narrow range. And so what I like to do is I like to invent little descriptions, right? So like, how do I label that range? Well, it's like decent hands that are kind of scared, right? That'd just be a little label that I would put in here. So they're decent hands that are kind of scared. So what is the definition of that? I would assume this player's got a lot of ace queen or worse. I would assume this player has a lot of like pocket eights or better, up to maybe jacks and occasionally queens. People do get scared with that hand, even though I'm not really one of them. And then so then when it came to Steve, he also re-raised very small in this hand, but I happen to have aces. So when I started thinking about, okay, if I were to put in a 5-bet here, I got a guy that's kind of scared, but he's certainly not going to continue if I 5-bet most of the time, I imagine. But what does this look like if I just call here? Well, maybe this guy comes along with a few extra hands, and I can actually play this really big pot comfortably because I got aces. Like how bad can it be when somebody's 4-bet you and you call and you keep another guy along in this spot? Then, I think it becomes very easy. Just, well, what is the best play? Maybe Steve could fold kings if I 5-bet all in, right? It's certainly possible. Do I ever want to get kings to fold? I don't want to give any reasons for any of these hands, right? So if he can include, jacks, queens, etc., if he has ace king sometimes, all of those hands get really scared, but post-flop, they're going to be out of position. They're likely just to send it in because they don't have many better options. So I thought, with at least 3 betting rounds ahead of me, flop, turn, and river, how big of a mistake would it be to just flatten that example? I don't know, not that big a mistake. So I thought it was a great spot to just call and then let the other guy come along.
All right, so just to show this example a little bit. So there was a raise over here.
Yeah, to 20, I think.
Yeah. Original raise over here with a stack over here, all right? And then it goes 75. This player calls 75 cold, and this player raised. Do you remember what they 4-bet to?
It was small. I want to say 175 or so.
All right, we'll put out 175. So here's what the thing that you're basically implying here is that with experience of understanding when somebody is basically you've seen a lot, right? So you sort of understand what people are thinking. So this player that's cold calling over here, are they doing this with aces? Probably not, right?
Correct.
And you take that to be, well, I'm going to think about the person themselves, the way that I know them, and the way that they sort of think about poker.
Yeah, the way they approach the game is a big one.
Yeah.
Is this person trying to win every dollar that they can win, or are they just killing some time, or are they gambling? And then most people are somewhere in between the two of those concepts, right? And to what scale are they?
So in this case, you've now narrowed this person's range by their very first action at the table, right?
Right.
Their first action eliminates some hands, right? They put 75 in, okay?
I would assume they rarely, here's an example of how I would view this. I would assume they rarely have 7s or worse for pocket pairs. I would assume they almost never have a hand like king, queen, or worse. I would assume that they never have ace, jack, or worse. And that just doesn't leave a whole lot. So, and then you can also clip off, it's very unlikely to be aces. It's pretty unlikely to be kings. And then it's reasonably unlikely to be queens. And it starts getting to, jacks is where it starts being like, yeah, that makes sense. 10s make sense. 9s make sense. These are hands that people, they know they should be playing these hands, but the way to play them is foreign. The way to properly play them, it's just how often is it cold 3-bet in front of you in live cash games and you have this particular hand? Most people probably just haven't had this scenario happen very often. They don't know what to do and they panic and just call because they think it's the safest option, but it's actually the worst option by a lot.
Yeah, and you sort of do talk about how playing passively, people think that playing passively is lower variance, but it's actually a lot higher variance. I'm not saying to go into that now, but it just sounds super related. So so then this player over here raises, and you said they raise a small amount, which to you is this little like deep-seated thing that they want to get called a lot of the time, which means that they probably have. So what hands would do this, right, is the question. And
so what's interesting here is I thought that the most likely range for Steve here was like kings, aces, and I just didn't feel like, even though I was teaching him to do this with ace king, to me it just didn't feel like he was at that stage yet. I didn't feel like he was ready. I didn't feel like he had it in him to be 4-betting small. And I actually wouldn't, this is a spot where I think his sizing's fine if there's not a cold caller. But when somebody puts 75 extra dead money in here, even with your top best hands, I think that probably closer to 3x is better when there's a cold caller here, and I think that's much bigger than what he made. So, I think that basically his small sizing it rates to be very good hands only, but I'm discounting ace king based on his experience level. I think kings and aces are pretty likely, but I have aces, so it's either a push or I've got him in a stranglehold.
So, and in that case, so you've ranged him to the possibility of aces based on his play, the possibility of aces and kings and maybe queens, although it sounds like you're not even including that. But then when you factor in the fact that you've got 2 of the aces, that leaves 6 combinations of kings and 1 combination of aces that he could be doing this with, right? And so you're literally,
kings are reduced greatly.
So what would you say to somebody who's like, well, they could totally be doing that with queens. They could totally be doing that with jacks. Like, what do you say to that?
Okay. I mean, I think it's unlikely. So I think the reason is the smaller the re-raise, the more the desire is for it to get called. So even though jacks are a pretty good hand overall, people it's so counterintuitive, but they size up because they're a little more scared, and they think that by sizing up, it's going to actually get a couple more folds. In my opinion, it just makes your hand a little more face up. So I think you just really shouldn't have a difference in your sizings, right? Like, so, it takes a long time to get there, I've learned, but it's so hard to get information off of what I have based on my sizes. And it's something that, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so now I'm going to do something that's fun for me. I'm going to spin this around, right? So How does Mike know all this? Because he's watched so many 2-5 hands as a dealer, right? And that's the thing. So while I've been at the table for years dealing poker and just like I'm thinking of it as an employee. I'm trying to run the game in a way that is best for the house and best for everybody in terms of integrity. And I'm going to be honest, when you've done it for a while, even after like 6 months, you've got room for more. You got room to do more than just run the game. So what you've been doing the whole time is you've literally been ranging people and seeing if you're right. And you get to the point where all of these little details are super loud to you because you watch it and you're just focused while you're dealing.
Dealing is so easy that I need something to occupy my mind while I'm there and doing this, redundant task, right? It's why not have fun while you're there? Why not enjoy yourself? Why not make the best of it? And to me, I like poker. I enjoy it. That's why I love dealing. So I'm just gonna be interested the whole time in what's going on.
So if you understand that ranging people is very valuable as a poker player, and then you start doing it as a dealer, I think there's a couple of factors here, though, that we need to mention in order for somebody to be able to do this effectively on their own. One, you mentioned once where when you're dealing, 90% of the time, you're looking at people's hands when they're in action. Okay, and there's a couple of results that you mentioned from that, and I want you to elaborate on that in a second. But first, you're looking at their hands while they're in action. You do that as a player too, which I do that as a dealer and not as a player, which is like fascinating. Because like the last time I went to go play, I was trying to do that. I have to train myself to do that as a player. But one of the benefits that you get from that you explained is you automatically count the pot and keep track of the pot as a player too.
Yeah.
Right. So can you just talk about your experience looking at their hands and exactly what you get from that and how you sort of store that info?
It's kind of taken me a long time to get there. I won't deny that, but I think as a dealer, staring somebody in the eyes directly gets awkward on occasion. And when that happens, I think that I just found myself avoiding the direct eye contact frequently. I certainly still do it. It's very necessary, particularly with masks now. But I believe that I just really, I think it's the types of poker tell books that I had observed over the years, the Joe Navarro type stuff. There is a lot of discussion about hands and the honesty that comes from the hands, right? So there's, something about open palms, something about, when the hands are close, that you're kind of like keeping your goods together, but when they're kind of loose, maybe you're not as there. It's a very fascinating concept, and I think it's very individual. So I don't like painting a broad picture of what people do with their hands, but I really think when it comes to comfort levels, when it comes to what their intentions are, I think their hands can really give away, if they're relaxed, if they're tense, if what that means for every individual person, that's gonna be slightly different. But I think that I've learned a lot just by watching that.
Well, so that's really interesting. The truth behind somebody's hands, right? It's almost like a philosophy that helps make it easy to pay attention to that, right? I've never heard you say that before, for the record. So I appreciate you sharing that in this setting.
Sure.
And I mean, it is true. I've definitely heard psychological studies about how humans naturally respond to somebody else's hands instinctively, and we don't necessarily understand it. For example, they talk about how if you're a person who always has your hands visible, people are going to be more comfortable, especially if you can see the palms. And if you're
it's something with the chest and belly too, that like if you stand up straight and you face people, you're more honest, and when you crouch and you bend and you hide and you I don't know, there's just like more deception there. But that, like I said, that is still different from person to person. But I think when how many people do you deal to in a dealership, right? If I deal 14 tables and there's, let's say 7 right now per table, like that's a lot of sample size that I get in one shift of what are these people doing. And then you start to learn all of it's different at every game, completely different. It's just, the games have a unique way of finding a certain personality type, and only those personality types filtering into those types of games. It's pretty fascinating because of that.
I'm just trying to wrap my mind around it right now, just thinking about because I mean, I teach looking at the person's action window is sort of what I call it, where their hands are, but I don't think about it being a truth source. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you said that is really valuable. So basically, between that and the fact that all bets are exactly in those places where the player's hands are, you're automatically keeping track of the pot every single time. And so you're training yourself like that as a dealer, and using the amount of the pot and bet sizing. Would you say that those are the two most relevant factors in ranging somebody? Like, is your starting point the first thing that you think about how much they bet?
No, I actually think their pure action line is the most important. So with the exception of like some like min raises or some like, whatever, I think it's pretty safe to say, what is the difference between them raising to 3x and 5x? Probably not that much.
So you're saying the pure action line is, did they fold, did they call, did they check, or did they raise, as opposed to how much, right?
Correct. And then I think the next level is, well, was this action big or small? And then how does that relate to them, right? So most of the time, players betting 3 times and then getting to the river and then betting a 4th time, it just kind of means mostly the same thing. But is there a big difference between somebody going half pot, half pot, half pot, and somebody going quarter pot, 1/3 pot, 2x pot? Sure, of course there's differences there. And certainly pros and fish are very different in the way we assess this. It's certainly it's a big project, but I like getting it out of my head here.
All right, so let's have this little example. All right, I put random hands here, so we don't know. It doesn't actually matter what the cards are, but let's talk about your thought process for a second here. If I'm trying to range somebody, so let's say this player raises before the flop, and you've got small blind, big blind. They're first to act, and we're seven-handed, and you can't see them there, but we'll say here. I'll put a stack here, and a stack here, and a stack here. Okay. Forget about the amounts of the stacks.
They folded.
So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players. This was the big blind, so there's $5 dead money here.
Okay.
All right, and 3 folds. Okay.
All right.
So I've taken fold, fold, and then fold, and now we've got 4 players. And so, what are you thinking about here? This player raised, and it went call, call, call. Are you ranging anybody to start with at that point?
So I would look at the first raiser, and I would try to judge his character type. Does he have a limp range? Does he have a raise first in strategy? He is in first position, so he is likely to have the least amount of hands that he would have from any seat in this seat. So what do I mean by that? Well, does this guy play Jack 8 here? I don't know. Does he play Queen 9 here? I don't know. King 10? I mean, maybe we're getting somewhere. Maybe not.
So you're saying if you're familiar and you've been at the table for a while and you've got what you've called old man coffee at the table with you, and he's first to act. Old man coffee is this term that was pretty funny that Mike said originally, which it's basically just saying some guy who's going to play pretty tight in this, like, I have it, I'm betting, I don't have it, I'm letting go away, correct?
You all know the type if you're a dealer. The guy that, he only plays very good hands. He's never tipped more than $1. He's not nice to anybody. He's reading something, whether it's the Wall Street Journal or, the newspaper at the table, and he's just not friendly. He's probably rich as hell, but, just whatever. He's an individual lone wolf kind of guy.
So you're sort of figuring out which of these guys is here and then trying to figure out what's more likely. But the one thing that's consistent is if they are in that first position, they're going to have fewer hands that are stronger than
their version of a tight range is happening here.
Got it.
What their version is going to be different than every other person.
Okay, so you've got this, and then let's say you're the person that called here. Okay, what is up with your range here? What can you say comfortably about your range, second into the pot in the cutoff?
I would probably, I don't love having a flatting range here all that much. I know some of our videos that we've definitely talked about it. This is an example of like a 7-handed game, so maybe it's a little different than some of the full ring examples we've been giving. I do treat the cutoff a lot like the small blind, and I generally do prefer a 3-bet or fold approach. But am I assuming here? Well, I'm probably assuming that this guy is likely to lose a big pot if he has a good hand and I'm able to beat it. So in a way, I might be kind of bounty hunting here in some capacity, where you've heard the classic line at the table, and any dealer has ever heard this. Like, the guy goes 5 ways. He raised under the gun. 5 people call. And he's like, oh, is it heads up? And you know why or where that comes from is, like, he had a hand that he should have raised. He knew he should have raised it, but he's just never fathomed going 5 ways with ace queen suited or ace king suited or queens, right? Like, it should be familiar, but it's just not. So they give away that they had this hand that is good but vulnerable. And so if he has that type of hand, good in the sense that, yeah, like, I want him to have the aces. People, they forget that this respect level that they desire is bad for your poker game, right? If I'm folding because you have aces, that's not good for you. You want me to be calling because I have it, because you're going to get action, right? I'm kind of going all over the place a little bit here, but there's also a vacuum.
Let me hear. Yeah, you can mute your side and I'll talk for a second. So part of what Mike's saying is, I asked the question, let's assume that you call here, and he's like, well, I don't necessarily call very often, but because you're saying that I called, something that you know about me is I'm calling if I think that this player is likely to go deep in a hand with a second best hand against me. and I'm trying to create a situation for that. So, okay, that's totally fair and reasonable. Let's forget about the fact that you were in the hand. Let's say this was somebody else and you're dealing, and it goes raise to 20. We talked about this, call, and call from the small blind. Is there anything that you can say about their hands at this point, or do we do most of our ranging for real later in the hand?
I'm gonna assume the small blind's making a mistake. How bad that mistake is hard to say. They're certainly capped ranges. They're certainly not the best hands that they can have. They have,
meaning that they would re-raise if they had what?
I think they would re-raise with most of their queens and jacks. Sometimes tens, but if they have pairs, I'm assuming probably nines and under. If they have suited connectors, I think pretty much most of them are in play here. I think they're rarely 3-betting king queen suited, even though I do it a reasonable amount.
And you're also,
they're all just kind of like, they just have like reasonable hands, or also, I mean, button caller could easily just have jack 4 off, and you just can't ever put them on that, right?
Yeah, but you're going to be somewhat familiar with each player as well. Okay, so here we go. So this all happens, and we bring the flop. All right, and I don't know if we can see it, but it's a queen 9-8 with 2 spades for this flop. And so right away, this player who has raised is going to, I'm sorry, this player is going to go first, and they're going to take an action. Let's say that this player checks, and this player right away is going to bet 75. All right. So the thing that I usually do as a dealer is I say 75, right? I'm not going too much deeper than that most of the time and trying to figure out what their range is. But I realized, and we apologize for Mike, he has a vacuum cleaner going on that he has no control over in the background. And it's poor timing, but he's okay with it. And we're okay with it too. And we can still hear you if you talk. So this is a $75 bet. And let's say that this player right here is going to...
Real quick, I just have to stop you because immediately, why the hell would he bet 75? That's such a big bet. So immediately, I would make the assumption most people are going to bet somewhere between 35 and 50 on this board if they bet. And so any what is the word I'm looking for? Any variant that either is above or below that, I'm going to treat as an extreme version. So if this guy bets 75, then I'm assuming he's just got good hands that he doesn't want to lose with, i.e., kings, ace, queen, maybe a set of nines, a straight. Like all these things can just lose to a flush, but like they're just, I don't know. People don't really fold flush draws, so it doesn't. You don't do what you're trying to accomplish when you do this.
So let's say that you're over here with a queen 10 of diamonds, okay, and this player folds, and you're faced with 75. Is this something that you consider just letting go of right there because of that range assessment?
So if we didn't have the gut shot, very much could make a fold here. Like if this 9 were a 7, for example, pretty reasonable muck. I think there's no issue with that. I think, folding better than that kind of makes it a little tough. Because what does he have? What is a good hand that's afraid of losing to a flush look like? Well, probably starts at like queen jack or queen king. So if we have a hand that doesn't even meet the starting requirements for our opponent's hand that's likely to do this, then it's probably a bad spot, and we're certainly not going to be ahead of the range when we consider all the factors.
And that's another thing too. People say position is so valuable, right? But if you have a queen 10 here and this board with this player who just raised preflop leading out, you can pretty much be sure that your decision is not done on the flop, right? But as a dealer, if you're watching this happen and you see this player here fold after this player bets 75 and this player calls 75, what goes through your head at that moment?
Really, now it starts to get a lot of personal. Like, okay, what is this guy? Like, who is this guy? What is he trying to accomplish? Why is he calling? What does he think about this guy? It's fascinating because just because you watch somebody make a horrendous play doesn't mean they would ever make that same play against you. They might be in a situation where they're trying to play their best against a certain type of opponent. And sometimes, people make mistakes. I individualize my attack against every person, really.
Okay, so and that totally makes sense. So now you're sort of leaning into who are the people, and combining it with what their decisions
I think
are.
now I start factoring in the broad picture factors, the things that are a little bit more difficult to explain in a broad sense. But now it's like we can get a lot more detail oriented. Okay, what is this? And then now when I start doing when you put a turn card out here, now I get to start combining all of their previous actions, right? So we know that this guy so far is raised in first position and bet this flop pretty heavy, gotten called, and then the turn's going to come and now he's got another action. So the further that it gets into the hand, the more info we're acquiring along the way, and that's going to actually allow us to, hopefully get the results we're looking for. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted, but now I'm not. I'm taking some hands that I think would actually make these actions.
Sure.
And I'm gonna see what ends up happening as a result of this. So let's do this. So I'll put that and that there.
I don't know who Master of Cards is talking to, but if it's me, thank you.
I love the background that we put up. So I think both of these backgrounds are pretty awesome. I'm pretty
sure. I didn't know which one you'd be referring to, but if it's me, I'll take it.
I'm going to shuffle this in so you can see that this is totally random and predictable. I'm going to put this $75 call out here as well.
Okay.
And look, absolutely no idea if you're going to be able to.
No, whatever. My opinions can't be wrong. That's what this format is. The only way I'm able to explore my mind so detailed is that if it's opinion based, they can't be wrong.
So
I can only learn.
So we had pre-flop raise. They bet 75, call.
Right? Okay.
And we're bringing this in and we're going to a turn. And here's the turn. And now this player is going to, let's say, they're going to bet. I'm trying to think of what they would bet. They're going to bet 150. And
so immediately in a multi-way pot, this guy is raised from first position, blasted the flop, and now bet half pot on the turn, which is a pretty sizable bet. Here's the thing. This guy just has a good hand. And what else are you going to do with now is where you've gotten to the point, okay, does my hand beat aces? If yes, then I can consider continuing. If my hand is like ace queen, seems like it's a hard fold, don't get me wrong, but you're certainly not in great shape here. You're certainly expecting to be against something substantial.
So now this player right here is going to ship it all in.
Okay.
And this player right here ships it all in.
Okay.
All right. So do you have any insight in terms of the ranges of these players just based on that?
From the first guy's perspective?
So over here, what's possible in their range?
He seems a little bit shallow here. So something I'm thinking is if he's got maybe 250 in his stack, a lot of hands may decide to do the thing that I call the give up. And that is they have too many chips to call, but they don't know what else to do. So they just kind of put it in and try to give up. So what kind of hands would be giving up here?
Exactly.
I mean, I got lucky to guess that, but
whatever, you pro.
The random flush draws could be giving up here. They want to continue, but they're not going to call and leave themselves with 100 back, so they're just going to put it in and say screw it. This guy putting in 1,500 is really should only be a straight and set of eights or better. I think maybe threes are not even a lovely get in here. So I don't think you should fold threes necessarily, but it might be a better flat of 250 if I'm grasping. So I would assume that as the under the gun raiser, flop better, turn better, getting the third guy raising you here, I'm not going to say I could fold sets here, but sets are not in great shape.
All right, so hold on. So first, right over here, you're saying that this is a give up hand that's like a flush draw. They didn't really know
It's
what
just
to do.
obviously any good version of that hand, right? If that hand is a set of eights, of course it's all in by now.
Yeah,
but
but
what could the when I'm discussing ranges, I like to talk about the fringe. Where do we cut that range? Where is the line drawn? And so if I figure out where the lines are drawn in both the value and the bluffs, then I can decide, okay, how do I play against the fringe as well?
Got it. And so over here, you're basically saying a set or better, and you said a set of eights or better.
I mean,
but
I think Queen Jack could fold the flop. So I just don't think Queen Jack's even in there. And if they don't, I think that's a worst case scenario. So to me, I think it's like eights or better only.
And then let's say this player over here is not sure, and they're going to end up folding.
So I would fold kings, aces very easily here. If we had the Queen Jack, I would not love it. I'm probably going to try to find a way to fold. If we have the set of queens, I think it's kind of a hard fold. But the problem is when you have the set of queens, that's two of the queens that are out of the deck. It's less likely they have the hands you want them to have. So do they have Jack 8 here? Probably not. Let's be honest.
So let's flip this over.
Sure.
I had an ace queen in this seat.
Super easy fold.
And so I like the fact that you're talking about it from each player's perspective. You're almost like trained to do that with live poker coaching. It's sort of a beautiful thing.
You're welcome.
I'm going to put this over here, and we'll say this player folded. This player over here had a Jack 9 of spades with the inside straight flush draw and the pair. So they had a pair and a flush draw.
So this is an example of if it's not a great hand, there's some fringe hands that can be included only because they're so shallow. And so when it gets to so I was going to try to say before, like the difference between this guy's range and the third guy's range is massive because this guy's has to win at showdown. And he's also risking like 1,000 extra against the other guy.
This guy has to win at showdown, and he has to be able to beat this hand, right?
And he has to be accepting of this guy calling off 1,000 more.
Right. And so I flipped this prematurely. Now I like the fact that you ruled out pocket threes because to me, what that means is I don't know how to play poker properly. I'm fine with that.
Sorry, my vacuum cleaner's back. I don't know that like when you have the threes, they have the eights, the jacks, and the queens more, right? And you're just completely at 0% when that's the case. I don't think the under the gun raisers folding queens or jacks. So I'm not saying I would have necessarily played it different in this exact board, but I think it's not an instant get in because what worse hands are calling.
Right, and that is one of your primary things with live poker coaching. What better hands are folding when you make a bet, and what worse hands are calling, basically. And so I would even
argue, like I said, I would probably fold Queen Jack if I were the raiser. But what happens if we call the 250 with threes and then we bet 500 on the river? Well, obviously this exact river wouldn't have worked out very well, but on most rivers, we would have a much, even against that ace queen. If we just flat, that guy's going to call 100 more of the ace queen, and then we might have a shot at getting a river value bet. And then so now, because the pot's frozen, well, now we just have to make the best decisions for the remaining pot.
So in terms of a playing strategy, the thing that you're saying is in this seat right here, by going all in, you eliminated hands like aces, kings, and ace queen and king queen from continuing when they're drawing nearly dead. And this is a bad strategy play at this point right here for this player because as you saw, this player folded after making the 150.
I guess that I've learned that this is one of the things that I do that most people don't, is that when I think my opponent's near dead, I do whatever I can to keep him around. And most people just have this fear of like, how often does this guy have a flush draw as played? The 150 guy. Almost never. Almost 0% chance a guy's going to play a flush draw this way, I think. So I just don't see what we're trying to protect. What are we accomplishing with this bet? We're not doing anything.
Unmuting Mike. Yeah, absolutely. I've got a dog barking in the background. I have no control over it, so I'm trying to.
I should be good the rest of the way.
So this is very insightful, and it's the type of thing that you do. Now, Mike and I had not communicated at all about what these hands were, and I dealt this out, and he, from experience, he was able to basically say what was likely that each person had. Why? Because when a player puts money into the pot, or if they check, they're giving away information about what they have. And it's something that as a dealer, you have access to an unlimited amount of.
Do you teach the concept for dealers that check is a bet of zero?
I do, actually, yeah. I just went over the video that has that. And I mean, it's totally right. Like anytime somebody has an action, if you check, it is a bet of zero. You're faced with calling zero right off the bat if nobody's bet. And it's funny that you said that. I literally just remastered the video in the All Texas Hold'em lessons that goes over that and made it a lot easier for people to follow. But why? Why did you bring that up?
Because you said whether they bet or check, that gives information. So to me, a bet of zero is also information. Is the same, I get the same info as a bet of 20 or a bet of 100, right? It's just how do I apply that info?
Gotcha. Totally makes sense. So, all right. So now we've sort of collected some info. We say keeping track of the pot as a dealer is a way to improve your game, right? You can, when you're in the box, you can know how much is in the pot at all times, which as a poker player is immensely helpful trying to make decisions. We sort of focus on ranging people, but there is also the value of understanding if you were in this hand, would you call with these hands, etc. So it's counting the pot and keeping track of the action, following the action, and it's being able to range players based on a combination of what their actions were and what that would mean for the individual who took it, right?
Well, and how they're going to respond to future action.
Oh, can you talk about that?
So I don't mean this in any sort of insulting way, but let's just say you and I ended up at a table, and the amount of respect that I know you have for me is going to lead you to make a lot more folds than you're going to feel comfortable doing, but you're going to do so because you think it's the right strategy decision. That doesn't mean you're not going to be willing to fight back from time to time, but I think I certainly in the next, 2 months, if we were to sit and play a full session together, I think it would be, you would decide it was in your best interest to avoid or stay out of my way or something along those lines. Now, what do I do with that information? I'm not necessarily saying I'm going to go blitzkrieg against you every time you put a chip in the pot, but it's going to help me, push a neutral decision into an aggressive decision if I'm weak, or change my value bets into smaller value bets because I think they're just more profitable against the types of decisions you're going to be making.
Yeah, I've played a lot of hands against you because of live poker coaching, and it's really hard. But that being said, let's go. You and me, we're going 25,000 hands, heads up, Negreanu versus Poke. What do you say?
I don't even know that I'm a favorite against you in a heads-up match, if I'm being honest. Like, I'm certainly am if we played online because I think you'd time out more than me. But like, and I time out more than I should. But I just think that's a skill I have that you don't. Yeah, I'm curious how this plays out because I have a bet on Negreanu at plus 400, 4-1. So like,
he's been learning. Whoever he's got teaching him and training him is helping.
I haven't followed the match at all, but. No shit, right? How is that not going to be the case? This guy his ego is massive, and he's got dollars for days. So he's a good problem solver. So like, maybe it doesn't work out, but is he 20% to win this heads-up match? I can't fathom.
Yeah, I totally know where you're coming from there. It's a question of, from the beginning, it's a question of, can he learn poker, which he's proven that he can, right?
Sure.
So
it's not all that. Listen, heads-up is a very difficult format. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't know what kind of edge you're going to have. We're all going to learn, I guess, and find out.
And going back to the example of you and I being at a table that's like six-handed and playing pot after pot or hand after hand after hand, the times that I end up going up against you are not times that I'm going to be enjoying myself. I mean, it's just that simple. I've literally said to myself in one of the live poker coaching hands that we haven't released yet, that I don't know what to do anymore, because I feel like I can't even get reasonable value from Mike anymore. He always knows how to find a fold, and it's just what's left, right? Well, the only way that I can beat you now is if I use your methods that are very difficult to play against you, and then I have to hope that you can't read me on top of the rest of it. It's like, so yeah.
I think what you just described is the real answer is, why would I make poker content? Why would I be willing to make other people better? Well, the answer is the desire to learn is really scarce. And no matter how much content I put out, very few people are going to consume it all. Very few people are going to apply it. Very few people are going to apply it against me. And if they do, then good luck, because I know my stuff better than you know my stuff. I guarantee it. So, and not to mention my stuff's always evolving and changing and learning. And like, I still don't, there's a couple hands we've made that, you know, I don't think that we're changing, but is that 100% my opinion at that exact moment? You know, maybe it's not as definitive as I've led on in the video at the time, for example.
Yeah, the thing that you bring to the table that helps with that is you give a lot of insight into where the decision is coming from as well. So it makes it easier. It's almost like somebody can always choose to make their own decision that's different than what you're saying if they understand the concepts that are underlying.
Yeah, of course. Listen, if you tell me that you think they have certain hands that I disagree with, then that changes the decision entirely, and the way I would play the hand might change as well.
But we've definitely had conversations about, like, you know, are you sure that you want to teach people how to play better, et cetera? And I used to think like, okay, well, if Mike gives his entire system, somebody else is going to be able to predict what he's doing. The thing I didn't realize was you don't have a system that is built in the same fashion that most people think poker, where you don't have a system where it's from this position in this seat, take this action with this hand. It's just not what you do. The thing that you actually do is you range people constantly, and that
poker's a battle royale. Poker's a battle royale.
It changes everything. When you have a bunch of different characters at the table and you're ranging those individuals constantly, it makes it so there is no exact way to play, which I couldn't go and beat you because you'd be ranging me accurately. That's part of the thing we're talking about. And that's what you learn as a dealer.
But no, let's take it a step further. When there's me, you, and Steve, I'm ranging Steve accurately and you accurately and playing my hands against those accurate ranges, right? And so, you know, do I make mistakes? Of course. Am I going to bluff off steps? Absolutely. But people got to prove to me that they can call in certain spots, or they can hold on, or that, you know, that they can make the big fold when they need to. Because if I have the strong hand and I think that they also have a strong hand, they're not willing to fold, well, guess who's going to be overbetting then as well and trying to, you know, confuse my opponents, etc. So I guess when we didn't understand what professional poker would look like 10 years ago, we didn't have any idea. But now I'm starting to kind of get an idea of like I'm a challenger. I'm a piece of this profession that I'm unique. I'm a character. I interact. There's ways to counter me. There's ways that I counter you. It's fascinating.
It's really cool also to think about, you know, online poker. It's a little tougher to range people. You almost have to define them as a fish or a reg, right? Like if you're
That's
playing
generally what
live,
it comes down to.
If you're playing live, especially as a dealer at the table, getting all this experience, seeing all the things that people do and the way they interact, you can sort of range them more accurately almost, just because you get so much more info about them, right?
There's a certain level of honesty that exists when you do a lot of data from your dealer seat. And so I don't want this to come off as any sort of disrespect, but you stereotype people. Like, I don't know how else to put it. Like, if there's a guy with gold chains and gold teeth flashing money around, guess who I'm talking trash to and trying to get to play big pots with me and showing bluffs to? That guy, because that guy is going to have an ego, and that guy is going to want to show off, and that guy is going to want to do certain things, right? Obviously, he can come in any skin color and be this character, but it's the character that I'm targeting, right? So, you know, the lady that just came back from the pool and it was sitting out all morning reading her book, and now she's on her iPad reading a Kindle at the table, right? She's probably just not going to bluff it off. Let's just be honest. She's there because she's having a relaxing weekend. She's trying to get away from the stress. What does that mean? Well, that changes every hand. I have no idea, right? It's the circumstances change, but creating these really detailed like archetypes is the best way I can put it, of characters, is the best way for me to create exact strategies for every opponent.
I love the thing you just did there. You talked about somebody. So let's say this again. Somebody who has an ego at the table. One way they might have it is with the chains and all of the flashiness and showing their money and all that stuff. What's another way somebody might have an ego at a table that you've seen before? Is there another thing before?
I mean, certain heritages. If we're going a certain way with this,
I mean, well, let me pause you for a second. So I understand the sensitivity of talking about stuff like this, but the thing you're doing right now is you're honestly giving somebody a starting point to think about somebody as a poker player, which is valuable, right? Let's disconnect from worrying about being offensive and just be honest about what it is you might look for as a starting point. And then if they give you a reason to think otherwise, then you think otherwise,
Sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, like, guys that are overweight generally just think they know better than everyone else, and they generally don't like getting moved off those opinions. I was one of those guys for a while, so I guess I can identify that. The old lady generally isn't bluffing. She can be bluffed pretty easily. So if you're value betting against this type of character, you want to do it in a little more concise, small fashion. I really just
you're saying value betting against a type player, you want to bet slightly less than you normally would.
So if this player buckles under pressure and we want to continue and drag them along in this pot, well, what is the next adjustment? Well, I guess we got to be value betting smaller because we're just going to get what we can. And the math call, if they call a certain size every time and they call double that size only 1/3 of the time, well, then you have to bet that smaller amount because that creates a long-term, more positive expectation. So, if this guy's willing to call off his stack with third pair because he thinks I have ace high or ace king high or whatever, well, guess who's going to be overbetting all in with, top pair, right? Because I just believe that I'm at this moment where this guy is going to buckle under the pressure. I mean, one of the best stories I have of this was a Hollywood final table. This is probably 6 years ago or whatever. But we were 7-handed. I was chip leader. I 3-bet the second in chips. He called. I had like jacks or something, and I end up getting this dream like jack 8-7 run out. And so the guy and I end up filling up, and we were very deep. But on the river, he's just staring me down. He's nervous. He's holding on for dear life. He called my 3-bet. He called my flop bet. He called my turn bet. And I just looked at this guy and I just knew he was over me. I'd been relentlessly beating this table up. I just moved all in for like double or triple the pot. And, he ends up tanking forever and ever and ever. And I don't know what kind of nonsense he called me with, but it was certainly nonsense. They did have to show his hand. He had like an 8 or something, I think. But I'm making that up mostly. But, I end up now I'm chip leader 6-handed where I took out second place and they end up giving me first just directly. So, those situations don't happen very often. But did I get lucky by just having that situation, or did I put myself in a position to capitalize on that luck? I don't know. That's the never ending question, right?
Well, that's part 2 of ranging people is, like we said, it's first you range other people. And in this case, you were able to sort of learn when their tipping point was, and you noticed when they went over it, right? But the second question is, how does your specific hand play against that range? And you brought up a handful of examples now where you're ranging people based on like what they do and the type of person that they are, where, an egomaniac maybe doesn't want to lose a pot because they have an ego. They don't want to feel like they lost you. But, the older woman who's just there trying to like spend some time is much less likely to go to be betting with a bluff. They're much less likely to be bluffing, for example. So you're going to get thinner value. They're more likely to.
If she bets the full pot on the river, I'm folding anything, more or less, right? It's just
right.
Fine, you got me.
With that said, the vacuum, it is what it is. With that said, you're basically ranging people and practicing it at the table as a dealer because you don't have a stack to play against anybody. And then you're taking all of that incredible, if you talk about roughly 30 hours a week for 10 years, right? How much does that add up to? Even if you do that for 1 year, if you range people for 1 year as a dealer between 1-2 no limit, 2-5 no limit, possibly even 5-10 if your room gets to deal it, sometimes 1-3, I mean,
It's way more fun at high stakes. It's way more interesting.
yeah, you did make the comment to me that as a rule of thumb, you're not really going to turn into range mode until somebody bets 50 or more, where you're not really going to start evaluating it unless there's a significant action to the pot. And you sort of talked about, I don't know if this is like really true for you, but you also talked about how you're unconsciously, consciously keeping track of how much is in the pot. And all
I'm
the
saying
action.
as a dealer. No, as a dealer, I mean, I guess the only thing I range in the small section is just, it's more of like, if they open the pot, what kind of open was it? If somebody opens 35 and 2-5, well, guess what? I think they have jacks and tens a lot more than they do a lot of other hands. So, that actually is super unique. I have king, queen off. I love 3-betting against the guy that opens too big, right? Because part of opening too big is the same thing as that ace queen when the guy bet full pot on the flop recently. In the example you gave, it's a good hand, but they're scared, right? Okay, if you got a good hand that's scared, well, I'm going to give you something to be afraid of. You want to know where you're at, I'm going to tell you where you're at. And I'm going to choose hands that are these like fake flips, right? This king queen plays really well against these big opens because it's most of the time it's a flip. Occasionally you're against ace queen and such. But here's the beauty of it. When you are dominated and they have the ace king or the ace queen, well, then it's harder for them to hit a pair and they're less likely to win because they can't get to showdown as often. So is that a problem? Generally not. If we're deep enough, generally I'm going to find a way to put enough pressure on that you're not going to be able to make your one pair to be able to hang on. So, there's a lot of interesting parts there.
If somebody's watching this right now and they do not believe that spending years ranging people is valuable, like, I don't know what to tell them, right? Like, listen to the way that you're talking right now. I've wasted a ton of time as a dealer at the table not ranging people constantly, and the result of it is I can't talk the way that you can talk. I can sort of follow it is the result, right?
The actual last thing I wanted to mention there, this is another point we've touched on before, but it's a favorite detail of mine there. So in that example, let's say I chose a hand like king queen and I think they're heavily weighted to jacks and tens. Well, guess what? I win on every ace high board also, right? So, the ace comes when they have it. It comes more often when they don't have it, but I'm going to use that because I understand how my hand is going to play against their hand in the long run. So I just think that that's just such an easy spot for me to accumulate.
So just to repeat that, you're saying if you are able to range somebody, say that they do lead out and open to 35, right?
A really big pre-flop raise that's uncharacteristic. They make it 20 and 25 a lot, and all of a sudden there's no limps. They're just in like mid position and it's 35. And they're a player that they have experience, but they're not good. They might be a reg, like one of the bad regs that's chasing high hands. You're
not saying no matter what. You're saying that there's a certain type of person that you associate this exact thing with, right?
No, this thing is pretty common amongst a lot of. It's a pretty wide stretching character type thing that people they have this thing with tens and jacks, and occasionally ace queen, occasionally nines are in this category, but it's a hand that they know they should be playing. But it's a hand that's kind of takes some skill to play post flop in the sense that, yeah, sure, you have tens, it comes jack 8-4 sometimes. You just don't always have over pairs, right? So it's not just like, easy peasy the whole time. It's the, kind of just the overall way that it's all played.
So they've made this raise with a hand that you've identified as very likely jacks or tens because of the bet size and just what you've seen over and over and over again. You have king queen, which is the example you gave, and I think this beautifully illustrates what we're talking about, right? You're now saying that's a fantastic time to 3-bet because you are basically a coin flip with the hand that you believe that they have.
Yeah, exactly. So even if I'm wrong and they don't do the things I want them to do, and if the board doesn't fall the way I want it to fall, the board just comes like 8-4 deuce, right? And I'm barreling off. None of this is working. Well, I mean, I can still just hit a king or queen a relevant amount of the time and just make the best hand by accident, right? So it's like there's a lot of ways that the hand goes. Well, what is all the ways it can go, and how often of these results work in my favor versus my opponent's favor?
Yeah, and I think it's a great example. It makes me want to go back in time. I'm 39 now, right? It makes me want to go back in time and just like start ranging people because what you do when you just
would have stopped at a different point in your ceiling. It's just, the game is constantly evolving. The info you've learned, it changes. It's less relevant. It's more relevant.
Yeah, that's true too. But I
The
still
game
think
never stops.
the practice of it is amazing. And you know what there's just so much benefit to taking advantage
I
of
think
yourself.
you're probably a natural at this because of your experience watching people. You just don't like, you don't know what you don't know right now.
Well, the
So when
thing
I
that I
start
did is
identifying them to you, they're going to start sticking out like a sore thumb, and you're like, oh my God, that's that thing Mike talked about. I have to do this. And it's just going to be great. But you have that experience of both playing and dealing for a long enough period of time that this stuff actually is natural. It's why you're a good communicator. It's why you're a good people person. It's because you have all this built in. You accidentally learn these skills, mostly because you just don't want to cause trouble at the poker table when you're dealing, right? You just want it to be smooth sailing. So you kind of be friendly enough with everybody of all types. Well, now I want to be separating them from their chips from all character types, right? So it's just, it's slightly different.
You're right. So I absolutely have learned some of these examples and started to see them. And I want to tell a little story.
Sure.
About 4 years ago, maybe, no, it was like 6 years ago, something like that. I was talking with somebody. I was a supervisor and they were a supervisor in a poker room in South Florida. And they were getting to the point where they were going to actually just go pro and play poker professionally. And I had spent a lot of time learning all the stuff in the Mike Caro book of Poker Tells, where I could literally take the stuff that was in that book, and this is really good stuff. I could take the stuff that was in that book and I could watch and watch and watch people and be able to put them on strong hand, not strong hand, etc. Sometimes even be able to figure out what they had. Now, he didn't really care about physical tells at all. He would use all of the stuff that you're talking about. I realized this after the fact, all the stuff that you're talking about in order to figure out where he was at and what people had and be able to play effectively. And I would always think to myself, well, how come you don't want to spend time learning all of this stuff that I have right in front of me from studying poker tells and live tells and all this stuff? And when I started talking to you, I realized the answer is both of them give the same information, but yours is much easier. Sorry, yours is much easier. It blew my mind.
It's a different way of coming to a lot of the same info. It really is.
That's the truth of it. You can spend a ton of time observing a person and really, like, it would drain me. It would be so tiring. The thing I love the most about learning to play poker the way that you teach it, and it works, is I love simplifying decision making. I love being able to be relaxed at the table as a poker player. And I'm not there all the way, but I have gone to play poker.
So a calm mind is one of the most important things in the game. And so we've talked about this a lot off air, where, you know, I will do anything necessary to make sure I'm sharp, I'm alert, I'm ready. It was so great when I used to be able to stay at Hollywood for extended periods of time, because I would just, every dinner break I'd go to my room, take a shower. Right. And every time I would get a great night's sleep because, I just go down the escalator and I'm at the poker room, so those types of details, caring about every little detail really matters. I used to late reg a lot because the highest stakes decisions were made in the last level of each night of the tournament. So if I was worried I only had 8 hours of decision making in me, maybe I would late reg the tournament because I wanted to make sure I got enough sleep. I had the right breakfast. My mind's sharp. I don't have any open loops that are distracting me. It's really just, making sure that I'm bringing my best game as often as I can.
Well, I super appreciate you talking through all this stuff with the True Poker Dealer audience. And even though I'm a part of it, I'm really excited every time a new live poker coaching hand is going to come out, because I learn stuff constantly, both by being there, watching it later, having to do the production on it and look through this stuff. And, you and I do our conversations about it where we try to identify after the fact what the most interesting part of the hand was and all those types of things. And it's just, it's really done a lot for my game. Now, for anybody that's thinking about dealing poker just to be a better poker player, if all they want is to be a better poker player, is dealing poker worth it? Or would you say just study playing poker?
So I think I've already mentioned this. I strongly think that unless you're very wealthy, you should be playing and dealing. I think that the hours of education I get on the felt dealing and getting paid for it, it's a college course in poker. It's a master's level course in poker, but you're paid, $30 an hour to do it. So to me, $30 an hour is a reasonable. It might be slightly low for a long-term win rate at 2.5 no limit, but it's pretty close. But I don't need to have 20K laying around in order to play. I can just go to work and deal. So I've really, really, really been of the opinion that unless your game is ready for 510 and up and your bankroll is ready for 510 and up, you should be splitting your time dealing and playing at the 2.5 and under levels.
So you would actually recommend to anybody, I've never heard you say this before, you would actually recommend to anybody who's looking to play full time, get a dealing job, because $30 an hour is an unbelievable bankroll. Instead of
it's an unbelievable opportunity for security in this treacherous journey you're going to go on.
That makes sense.
And listen, like I was also staked a majority of my time. I really separated the money from the poker as much as I could. Every opportunity I had to say, okay, I don't want the money to affect my decisions here, I took that opportunity. So for me, that allowed me to keep my focus on just the poker. Don't let the results get in my way. Don't let the fact that I'm on a downswing discourage me, because I know how great I am and I know how great I'm going to be if we put in enough reps.
And is there anything other than learning to range people and learning to count every single pot all the time that you would recommend to people while they're dealing? Anything that comes to mind, or are those two the primary two things? I'm okay with you thinking about this for a second, because this can be really valuable if you have anything else that you do. I think he's
I'm digging.
He's thinking through what he does while he's at the table as a dealer. You know, you talked about watching people's hands all the time, and you get a lot of truth from people's hands, and you're sort of learning how these different actions. I mean, are you spending a lot of time seeing how people bet, or do you just feel like you get that information?
That's part of the hands, really. The you know, whether they're grabbing chips and flinging them in, or whether they're putting them in nice and gently, or whether they're, you know, the staging area, what they're doing with their chips, how, you know, it's a lot, I guess. I guess just having a level of alertness that you know, being a dealer actually teaches you to have that. There's so many little things you have to be paying attention to simultaneously. I think that kind of skill improved my poker game long term.
Well, I super appreciate you spending what turned into about a half here, and yeah, let's go to the comments for just a minute and see what some people said. Let's see. I've got. I assume he's not here anymore, but Nick is a good friend of mine, and he said hi, Mark, and his picture's there, which I like. I hadn't seen that before, so
that's not the kicker, right? That FL kicker.
Kicker, I don't think so. I don't know what you're referring to with that.
There's an NFL kicker for like 6 years. I don't think he's in the league anymore. His name was Nick Novak.
That's really funny. People used to tease my friend Nick and say he looked like Tom Brady. I'm not sure if he does or not, but I always thought it was fun to tease him on that. Here we have Chris Code Support says, hi there, best wishes from Germany. Appreciate you tuning in. And this is a really nice example of where people come from. I get people in these live streams from everywhere.
Hey, if your title says Code Support, we could probably be friends. So I've met many of the German freaks in poker. They're all as good as advertised. Like, they're so good.
That's a very interesting insight there. Here we have Real Roboto Ronin in dealing class now. Thank you for all your tips and tricks. Well, listen, you are the perfect person to be watching this.
Put your phone away. What are you doing?
Just start.
I would kick you out of class right now.
Well,
I'm teasing.
I think the thing that he's saying is at this point in his life, he's in a dealing class, not physically in the class. Or if I'm wrong about
okay.
All
right. That makes sense. I just thought like, hey, I'm in class. Thanks for helping me get through this test. Like,
it's pretty funny. Master of Cards loved last week. If you missed the live stream where I was with Masters, he joined for the last live stream, and we talked about, can a magician beat casino surveillance for poker?
Oh, that was this guy?
Yeah,
I didn't get to watch it yet, but I'm really excited.
He did such an unbelievable thing, and he's going to be coming back and continuing that conversation with me on December 15th. And I love that he's here. I don't know if he's still here, but. And then look, you know, of all things, he tries to call me out when I'm setting hands. This is back from when Mike and I were playing that hand.
This is a thing that magicians do, is deflection. It's trying to get the attention off of themselves and on. That's one of the skills they have.
maybe I need some help from you next time I talk to him then. And let's see, we've got Eddie saying, "Hey, Mark, love the show. Appreciate that. Always happy to interact with everybody. I've literally said I really enjoy spending time with everybody here. I have to figure out a way to interact with the comments a little bit more. I'm still working on it. This is my second one.
It looks nice how they come up, how you're doing it right now. That's pretty impressive, I think.
And here's Joey saying, "Dang, I'm always late." Well, it is what it is, right? I say it's 2 p.m. on Tuesdays, and I try to do my best with that. But yeah, I think I sort of discouraged people from asking questions too, because we did have the super chat comment up that we would answer questions for $5, and it is going to be like that. I'm happy to answer questions toward the end, but if somebody wants to interrupt and have Mike answer a question or me answer a question or something like that, whatever the context is, makes sense to, if we've got a show that's planned, it makes sense to do it with a little super chat. It stands out a little bit better too, and it's a nice way to show appreciation for the stuff that we're trying to do here. So I guess we can wrap it up by saying, we want to thank everybody for watching this for sure. And I definitely want to thank Mike for being here and spending time. And live poker coaching is where Mike teaches how to deal poker. And it's one word on YouTube is the channel name, Live Poker Coaching, one word. Anybody can find that there, where there's a lot of lessons to learn. And there's going to end up being 500 free videos there for anybody to pretty much understand. If you go into that channel, I just want to finish this. If you go into that channel and you do it with the mentality of ranging your opponents first, and then how your hand interacts with that after, it's going to make a whole lot more sense. It's just incredibly valuable. And Mike, I'll let you wrap it up.
I want to say thank you again to Mark. We've been very good friends for a very long time now. This has been a little bit of a long overdue collaboration on your channel, I feel like. And just thank you so much for all your hard work and all the ideas that we bang our heads together on and all the ability to execute. I just know we're just going to keep creating poker products, and they're going to be great. So anybody that wants to subscribe to my channel or your channel, if you're a poker player or any sort of poker connoisseur, it's going to be the place for you.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that too. Please subscribe to True Poker Dealer. Every single time somebody subscribes, it makes it easier for my interactions with YouTube. Please subscribe to Live Poker Coaching. It's the same thing. Just we're trying to build these things up in the right way. And every single subscription, it might be insignificant to you. You might be like, I don't want to deal with it. But we're not going to bug you with our subscriptions. Please subscribe. True Poker Dealer, Live Poker Coaching. It makes our lives easier. Thank you very much, Mike. Super appreciate it. Guys, next week, Tuesday at 2 p.m., I am going to be interviewing a current dealer, someone that I used to work with a long time ago. She is a left-handed dealer, and we're going to be talking about what it's like to be a left-handed dealer, which I have no experience with. I have taught left-handed dealers, but
I've dealt tables left-handed on purpose before. I used to deal the limit game left-handed from time to time just to practice. I'm ambidextrous naturally, so it was bad, but it wasn't crazy bad. I also had a shuffler machine on the table, so that helps.
That's fascinating. Although there's no such thing as a lefty shuffle. I just want to throw that at you right now.
True.
Right? Yeah.
Well, you don't you strip differently?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You could strip the other way. I would never be able to do that without putting the hours in. But that's fascinating, and that's something that I think you actually said it once, but I didn't remember it.
Yeah, I don't remember where we've said it. It might have been off air, but I've did it maybe 12 times total. If there was a slow limit game and it was kind of just a whatever table, I got a skill all practice, and I would deal the whole table left-handed, and it was pretty good. I mean, they certainly didn't think I was a new dealer, right? I certainly did most of it. That's
the mentality that you bring to everything that you do, though, and that's why you taught yourself to range people, to range players, and all that stuff, because you're there trying to make your time as valuable.
What if I break my right wrist? How am I going to make a living?
Oh, that is absolutely true. And
I might need to deal left-handed in a case of an emergency, right? When I played baseball, I learned to bat left-handed because you never know. It's almost like in poker. I learn all the other games because it makes my hold'em game better. I learn tournaments because it makes my cash game better, right? It's just skill stacking. The more skills you stack, the better of a prospect you're going to be in whatever you're trying to attack.
Love it. And I'm going to say thank you again to everybody, and have a good rest of your day.